Dementia-Friendly Summit. My name is Jan Doherty, and I've had the pleasure of being involved with this initiative, now program, that is soon to be in 10 cities around Arizona and hundreds around the country. And in fact, we were the 5th city in the nation to become dementia-friendly. So we've got a lot to be proud of here in Tempe. I'm going to have Naomi Farrell come forward. She is the Office Director with the Office of Education, Career, and Family Services. And I can't say enough about the city in terms of taking this program and running with it and funding it. You know, it's one thing when you got grant money to do things, but when the money runs out, you have to show you the money. And the city has done that, and it really was Naomi and her team and leadership, along with our former mayor, who, and our current mayor, who have continued to support this important work. So Naomi, welcome.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you for being our facilitator today. Jan is an important reason that we have Dementia-Friendly Tempe and this annual summit. She is formerly with the Banner Alzheimer's Institute and is now president of Travels, which helps families with loved ones with memory loss plan and execute successful travel. The idea for Tempe becoming part of a national network seeking to ensure that communities across the U.S. are equipped to support people living with dementia and their caregivers began with Mark Mitchell, former mayor of Tempe, became a caregiver to his mother, Mary Ann, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. In 2014, Mark learned about Dementia-Friendly America and became an advocate for the concept, resulting in Tempe leading Arizona in becoming the state's first designated community and 5th in the nation. In March 2016, with our partner, Banner Alzheimer's Institute, we hosted our first summit. Today, we welcome you to our 6th annual Dementia-Friendly Tempe Summit, focusing on family caregivers. Tempe has served as a model for the state of Arizona, where we now have 7 dementia-friendly communities, including all of Pima County. Our Memory Cafe has also been a model and inspiration not only for other cities, but private organizations are also hosting these gatherings that welcome people living with dementia and their care partners. We are proud of the Tempe leadership, who are making it possible for people with dementia to live well in their communities while also better supporting their family caregivers. If you're not familiar with Dementia-Friendly Tempe, it's an initiative with programs and resources for families of people living with memory loss. We have Memory Cafe, which meets twice a month at the Tempe Public Library for both caregivers and their family members. For the loved ones, they meet with a paid facilitator for activities to stimulate their brain and memories. And for caregivers, we have our support group led by an experienced volunteer facilitator who have themselves been a family caregiver. We can get more information by visiting the Dementia-Friendly Tempe table in the lobby. We are also looking for new volunteers who are Tempe residents and would like to join our bi-monthly Dementia-Friendly Tempe Action Team. This committee is essential in helping to evaluate and plan for dementia-related programming in Tempe. If you are interested, please let us know by visiting the Dementia-Friendly table in the lobby or by indicating your interest on the evaluation form in your packet. We know from various surveys and research in our community that people want Tempe to be a place that is livable and welcoming to all ages and life situations. As such, we are looking into identifying areas that may benefit from additional supports or new programs and services. Arizona will see the second highest increase of those living with dementia over the next 10 years. In Tempe specifically, we would go from 1,500 to 3,000. In our aging community and society, ambulatory difficulty, hearing difficulty, and independent living challenges are more common with respondents ages 65 plus. Most older adults wish to maintain their independence, are reluctant to commit to a full-time assisted living situation, and rely on family and friends as caregivers. In addition, caregivers may also feel and be overwhelmed by their multitude of responsibilities. Moving forward in the program, we will hear from people with expertise and experience on these matters. If you look at the printed program for today's summit, you will see the lineup of speakers and caregivers. On the back of the program is a list of their websites and contact information. Now I want to thank you to all our wonderful speakers and panelists, and to you for attending today. And now I'll turn it back over to Jan, who will give you more information specific to today's program. Thank you.
So a couple comments just before we get going. If you haven't seen, we have a videographer here joining us, and we will be videoing this session, so that will play on channel 11, so people who aren't able to come have the opportunity to see it later. So I think the camera's positioned so that none of you show up, but if you are adamant about not showing up, then you want to make sure you stay away from the camera. Otherwise, you just gave us consent that you'll be filmed. In your packets today, too, a couple things are in there. One is an evaluation form. So when we do these programs, getting feedback from you is incredibly helpful. As you see, this is our 6th annual program. We took a couple years off because of a little pandemic that we had called COVID. But really, we plan these based on what we learn from folks like you. So this year, it's all about caregiving, because it's been a rough couple years. Would you agree? Particularly when we've all been forced into isolation, and then when you're caring for somebody with memory and thinking problems, even more challenging. So your feedback is really helpful as we think about next year and what we're going to do. Also in your packet, you should see some note cards, and they're in your packet for you to write questions that you might have. As you see, we've got a really packed agenda today because we've got some amazing speakers, and we've got a group of caregivers who are here to keep us real as experts, if you will, in the field. We do this for a living. They do it out of love, and so we're so happy to have them. So as you think of questions during the seminar, please write them down. We'll be collecting them, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A with our panelists as well as our caregiver panels. So first of all, this is what I call Dementia 101. One of the best lessons to learn is flexibility. If you're not flexible, this disease and the person you care for will put you in the ground. Life happens. So today our panel has switched a bit. So one of I want to acknowledge Anastasia Johnstone, who has been with us and our action team. So Anastasia is special for lots of reasons. She is a person living with dementia she has a condition called frontal temporal degeneration, which is a much rarer form. But she is on our action team and was going to be here because she has also found herself caring for her mother. Unfortunately, there was a death in the family, and she is attending the memorial appropriately so. And then I'm going to have former Mayor Mark Mitchell come and make some comments. He, too, had a schedule change that meant he couldn't join us for the panel. But we do have his dad and former Mayor Harry Mitchell, and we have Verla Dick, both who have been spousal caregivers, so you're going to hear kind of reflection. And then our dear Susie Peck is going to take Mark's place here at the table. But I'd like Mark to make a few comments, because really, had it not been for his vision, his leadership, none of this would have happened, right? Great partnerships are just that. They're great. But you have to have a leader. And I have always appreciated Mark's leadership and his continued support of this effort. And by the way, our current mayor, Corey Woods, too, is very supportive. He and the city council, I think, are at a larger Maricopa gathering today, so they couldn't be here. But Mark, if you could make a couple comments, and then we're going to let him go, and we're going to start our program.
Thank you very much, Jan, and thank you all for coming. This is something, as Jan mentioned, that's very near and dear to me. My mother, Mary Ann Mitchell, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at the age of 68, and it was very interesting how it all unfolded. But because I was in a position of leadership, I was involved with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I had other colleagues around the country, I started talking about Alzheimer's and dementia. And it just so happened that my friends from the Twin Cities Mayor R.T. Ryback out of Minneapolis and Mayor Chris Coleman out of St. Paul. They're the leaders in dementia-friendly communities. I was talking to them, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time, getting some information from them about what dementia means in dementia-friendly communities. And it was back in 2014 where we applied. I worked with our city staff for a White House Conference on Aging, and we were one of 5 communities selected throughout the entire country. The whole state of West Virginia was one of them, and little old Tempe, Arizona was another one out of the 5 that were chosen at the time. And it took on a leg of its own. I couldn't be more prouder from our city staff standpoint, from the mayor's staff that I had at the time, my own staff, but also leaning on my father for his experience and going through all this different trial and tribulations of a caregiver and what it meant. And then you come to find out there's a lot of people don't know what a caregiver really means and what's all involved. So growing up in Tempe, for those that have been in Tempe a while, Tempe is a very caring, inclusive community, and it just would seem to be the right fit. So we were able to partner with Banner Alzheimer's too, with Jan Doherty and her team, and it really was a great relationship. It really evolved. We started Memory Cafe. We started having education sessions on those individuals and caregivers of what it meant. A lot of people don't know where to go, and that's what we thought Dementia-Friendly Tempe would help bring to the greater community and really to the rest of the state. Now, I think Naomi mentioned there's 7 other communities that are dementia-friendly, but I was talking to Jan, now there's 10. And Tempe was the first one in Arizona, so that's something to be very, very proud about. Utilize this information that you see today, that you hear today, the stories, to help you and help your neighbors. One of the best programs that we did was we trained dementia-friendly, we trained the trainer, was it? Dementia Friends. And I got to tell you, we incorporated with our neighborhood associations throughout the city. We trained all of our first responders in the city of Tempe, along with the Chamber of Commerce, to look for signs of individuals with Alzheimer's. It's just the type of community that Tempe is. And other cities starting to hear what we're doing, and they wanted to get more involved. Not only was it to take care of your loved ones, but also it was important that the community cares. And I think you're going to see that throughout the program and all the wonderful vendors that we have that support us. But again, thank you all so much for being here. It really is one of the highlights of my career, is making sure that we had a program like this to help not only current individuals and loved ones, but also future generations. That's something that is impacted. That's something that Tempe has done for many years. It's to help future generations. So thank you very much for being here. Share with your friends, because the power of your friendships and telling someone, it just multiplies more over and over and over. So thank you so much for being here. And let's give a round of applause for Jan Doherty. And there's great programs out there, and I have to do a personal shout out to Sherry Friend with Oakwood Creative Care. My mom, that was a safe haven place for my mother, and I know my dad's going to talk about it. There's other organizations throughout the valley that can help those caregivers on a daily basis. So thank you, Sherry, for everything you've done with Oakwood Creative Care.
Thank you, Mark. All right. So a couple things before we get going. One, so our colleague Janice Garino's here, and she, Banner Alzheimer's Institute actually is the lead for all of our dementia-friendly activities around the state. So one is, Mark just mentioned Dementia Friends. So that's teaching community members what dementia looks like, and when you see it, how can you make a difference? So she's got a table. They're doing some training. We're starting in person again. If you'd like to lead a program, there's a Train the Trainer program, see Janice. And then how special that we're doing our summit today, when tonight is Shine a Light on All Dementia. So we will light up the Capitol in purple to remember people who are affected and their families like you who are essential parts. So more information on that, you can see Janice at her table. So now on to our program. We have got like 3 dynamos here to speak, and then amazing panelists to respond. Susie, if you want to go join them. So our first is Dr. Mary Beth Gallagher, who is the director of the dementia program at Hospice of the Valley, who's going to lead us and talk about how we can live mindfully to care for ourselves. We have Sherry Friend, who's the CEO and president of Oakwood Creative Care, a very innovative day club in Mesa. And then finally, we have Elaine Poker-Yant, who is with Visiting Angels, social worker extraordinaire, who's really going to talk about helpful living. So each of these speakers will speak for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to have a 10-minute kind of response from our caregivers in terms of the content. They're the keep it real folks for us. And at the very end, we're going to have a larger Q&A session, okay? But we're going to try to stay, we will stay on time. We will end at noon, but it's going to be relatively fast paced. So buckle up, and I'm going to invite Mary Beth to come up and to start us off here.
Do you think the clicker works?
It should,
I have my clock here so that you can you tell me, go!
So I would hit the space bar.
Oh, hit the space bar. Okay, so I'm going to be back here. All right.
And he's timing you.
I'm timing me too, though. We'll make sure, like double. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to borrow from some of the principles of mindfulness. I bet a lot of you have heard of mindfulness at this point, but if you haven't, let's come to a group understanding. Well, can you see that, or do the lights need to be dimmer? Are we good with this? I'm getting both messages. So we're going to work on splitting the difference here, shall we? All right, so see this cartoon? Do you get this? Have you ever been in a place that's really beautiful, but you're so consumed with going on in your head that instead you're missing everything around you? You know, the caption for this cartoon could be, "Why my dog is happier than I am." Right? And this really, thank you so much for bringing the lights down. So this is really capturing what mindfulness is. Paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. Okay, so let's break that open. You might say, I'm in the present moment, I'm right here. But they've actually done studies, and they've found out that human beings, at least 50% of the time, are not in the present moment. We're either rehashing something from the past, or we're planning what's next after this, right? A lot of us we love those little checklists, next, you know? Or maybe we're getting distracted right now by some worry or some fantasy, and so we're not fully here in the present moment, are we? So then the next thing, without judgment. Well, what does that mean? I don't feel very judgy, but actually at every moment, the brain is deciphering what's coming into the brain through the senses and the thoughts and the emotions. And the brain, whether we're aware of it or not, is doing this. Like it, love it, me, you know, all that kind of stuff. So we're not saying that this practice is going to teach us how to not judge, because that would be worth $1 gazillion. But instead, what this concept means is being more present and being aware of the judgments, how we're casting colors on all of our experiences. Just simply being aware of it can make a huge difference. Let me give you an example. Have you ever met somebody and right from the start you're like, I don't like them, they're not for me. And then the universe has it that you have to spend more time with this person, and you realize, whoa, I missed it all. It's still the same person, but my judgments almost had me miss recognizing the fullness and the grace of this human being. So that's why, just some of the reasons why mindfulness can be so important. Oh, thank you, Jan. You're going to get big bucks for this, Doherty. Okay, so another way of saying it, if we land on what mindfulness is, let's talk about what mindlessness is, because you may be familiar somewhat with this, of rarely being in the present, but rather in the past, future, or a fantasy world. Going on automatic pilot. Who here has ever looked for your glasses when they're on top of your head? Who here has ever looked for your phone when it's in your hand? Just, you can admit it safely. What happens in this room stays in this room, people. Or always hurrying to get things done. Next. Now, if you're a dementia care partner, you are not a stranger to always hurrying to get things done next. As a matter of fact, they've even done studies. Does anybody here make lists? Do we have any list makers? Okay, now, next to the list, do you ever put that little like square box or something so that you can check it? Right, or do you put a line through it when it's done? Do you know when we do that, it squirts dopamine in reward centers of our brain when we put the line through? So that's all good. However, here's where we're missing out. There's a neuroscientific principle that's referred to very simply as taking in the good. When you and I hit the check mark, right, and the check, we get it all the way to the top, our brain, if we're overachievers, jumps immediately into the next thing that needs to be done. when we didn't pause even for 60 seconds, and nobody can say they don't have 60 seconds, where you pause and you just take in the good of, wow, that feels so good to get something done. And when you do, it allows the neurochemicals in our body, the good ones, to really circulate. It's that simple. Do you think that you might be able to do that a little bit more? You know, there are times when there's nothing else you can do. When you're on the phone waiting, which all of us do that, when you're in line waiting, when you're driving and you're at a stoplight, these are all opportunities to practice mindfulness, even for the busiest of people. All right, so there's many different practices of mindfulness. There's none that's better than the other. All streams flow to the sea, so to speak. So we're gonna practice just a few of them. And one of them, it will be awareness of breath, because I know that no matter what's going on in your life, you are breathing. And nothing is more present than this breath. It comes in and then it's done, right? It goes out and it's done. So it's in the present, so it serves as an anchor. And you will not need any mindfulness practices if you are not breathing, okay? So we can just, while we are breathing, let's use this. All right, so you want to do 1 minute of practice? You play along? Okay, great. So if you will, finding a comfortable position that allows you to experience a sense of ease, okay? Just get comfortable, all right? And if you're comfortable closing your eyes, or you don't have to, just that when we close our eyes, it eliminates some distractions. Or otherwise, just soften your gaze and looking down. So now you're in a comfortable position, your eyes are closed, and the invitation here is simply to breathe. So there's no special kind of breathing here, just when you're breathing in, sense the breath coming in, meaning where do you feel that air movement? At the tip of the nostrils, the back of the throat, maybe you feel your lungs expanding and then contracting, maybe you feel the slight rise and fall of the belly. So sensing the breath coming in, and then just releasing it, sensing that release. Just breathing. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. You're already breathing, so I'm just asking you to be aware of it. And at times you may notice that you get distracted, and if you do, that is so normal. It's not a big deal. Every one of us becomes distracted. When you become distracted and you notice it, you bring your attention back to the breath, wherever it is on the inhale or the exhale, almost like you're riding a wave to and from the shore. And then when you're ready, please start opening your eyes. You can wiggle your toes and fingers and bring your awareness back into the room. Okay, so just shout out. What did you notice? No good or bad, just what did you notice? What? Peace. Thank you. What else? What? Calm. I forgot to put my hearing aids in. They're in my purse. What else? What is it? Breath. Yes. I'm sorry? Rhythm? Centered. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Now, who felt distracted? Anybody notice they were getting distracted? Anybody notice some judgments like, am I doing this right? I don't know if I'm doing this right. Or, I don't really like this. This is stupid. Right? Honestly? Okay, good. So we welcome it all. We're not pushing anything away. We're seeing that there's capacity, there's this capaciousness, this ability to expand and just whatever's here. All right, it's here. Instead of that tension that starts to build up, right? Okay, so that was just awareness of breath. That's a practice. There's going to be so many times that you're forced to wait, or you're in the bathroom. There's all these times when you can't be doing that you can be practicing mindfulness. Little increments of it. Do you think it could have an effect on you? Sometimes 30 seconds can make a big difference. Next slide, please. So why are we talking about this today? The reason we're talking about it today is because you and I learned years ago a saying that goes, stress kills. Well, actually, researchers found in the 90s that it's not stress that kills, but it's our reactions to stress that can cause the conditions that could kill us or make us very sick, okay? So the good news is our reactions, we can change those if we practice over time. And so the key words in the research these days is about stress resiliency. How can I meet stress in a way to optimize my well-being, to stay standing, or if I get knocked down, how do I get back up? That's what, in my opinion, a lot of dementia caregiving is about. And so because of the laws of neuroplasticity, that the brain, wherever we put our attention, grows. You can teach old dogs new tricks, is what I'm trying to say here. Wherever we put our attention, that's why this gets so exciting. We can choose to do things differently. And in science, we say neurons, brain cells, neurons that fire together, wire together. Meaning when we do something over and over and over again, those connections start to wire together. Make sense? Okay, next slide, please. Now, the breath is not for everybody, especially since COVID. There's been a lot of anxiety related to the breath. So people need a practice that's a little bit more concrete. So we're going to do something called a body scan now. Can we just do a minute of that? Are you open to it? All right. So again, finding this position that allows you to experience a sense of ease. Closing your eyes if you'd like, or just softening your gaze. There's nothing magical here. We're just trying to minimize distractions. And then when you're ready, bringing your attention to the sensations in your body. For instance, bring your attention to your seat. If your eyes are closed, how do you know you're seated in the chair? Do you notice the sensations of the chair, the pressure or the temperature against the back of your thighs, your buttocks, your lower back? Noticing that sensation with openness and curiosity, simply being aware. Now, how about you bring your attention all the way down to the feet? Now, some people don't have sensation in your feet, but if you do, just noticing the sensation in the feet, whatever it is, warmth, coolness, dryness, moisture, pressure, tingling, discomfort, or maybe nothing at all. And if there's nothing there, that's fine, because that's your experience in this moment. There's nothing to make or fix here. Now shifting the focus to your hands, noticing the sensations in your hands, your fingers, your fingertips, maybe tingling, maybe temperature. How about shifting up to your shoulder region and your neck? Simply breathing and noticing. And now coming up into the head, how's that temporomandibular joint, the jaw? How's the forehead and the temples, that area between the eyebrows? And then starting at the crown of your head, very quickly scanning all the way down to the soles of your feet so that you hold in your awareness this one living body that accompanies us for an entire lifetime until we need it no longer. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes, bringing your awareness back into the room. Next slide. What did you experience in that? Shout it out, please. Calmness, thank you. Physical sensations, Did anybody almost fall asleep? Yes, yes. Because you know what? The brain, when is a human being doing nothing? When they're not on their phone, when they're not doing something. So the brain goes, oh, wait a minute, I got this one, I know this one. Right? When you're absolutely still doing nothing. So anyway, next slide, please. These are just little practices. Again, if you're, no matter where you are, there's going to be moments when you have to wait and when you're doing nothing. Could you bring your awareness into your hands or into the soles of your feet? And you know, one of the great things is, you know, most of our problems, first of all, thoughts aren't facts, are they? Some thoughts are facts, but others aren't. And so sometimes when our heads are really spinning with worry, etc., and we want to stop, but we just don't feel like we can, the good news is if we bring our attention all the way down to the soles of our feet, it's the furthest possible way from up here where a lot of the problems are, Yeah. So this practice, this is, I think I'm going to end with this, of This is called the STOP practice, and I teach mindfulness for dementia caregivers at Hospice of the Valley's new Dementia Care and Education campus. And this is the practice that people come back years later and they say, I'm still doing it. So what we do is we get these red stop signs, and we teach them about this practice, and the first part of this is to go home and find out where it is that you get triggered during the day. All right, so that's bringing awareness into where do I get triggered. So let me use an example, because my dementia care partners and people living with dementia have been my greatest teachers. And so I'm just here hopefully being a vessel of what I've learned. So the bathroom, assisting someone with toileting can be a place where there's a lot of tension that happens. So the caregiver that I was working with took the stop sign and put it in the bathroom just as an anchor, just as a cue, a visual cue that, oh, that's right, when I'm getting up, maybe I'm going to do this practice. So she was helping her husband take his pants down, and of course he was pulling them up, and she was bringing them down, and he was pulling them up. So we're getting into the, no, I'm just trying to help you. No! And of course it's just getting more and more and more tense, right? So, and how many times a day do we do this? And what's the definition of insanity again? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results? Okay, so she looks over, she sees the stop sign, and she bursts out laughing. At which point, he kind of looks at her and he bursts out laughing too. But the practice would be in those moments when I see this to go, S means stop what I'm doing. So in the midst of, no, just hands off, back off, all right? Stop. T, take a breath. Actually, take a couple of them, all right? So, because there are certain ways when we breathe that we turn off the fight, flight, and freeze, the sympathetic nervous system, and we turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is tend and befriend, rest and digest, which is probably going to get you further and living in peace. So taking some breaths, then looking at what's going on here, recognizing the insanity of the moment, and I was just about to do for the 50th time what has never worked before, right? And then P stands for, well, a whole bunch of things, but proceed, pray, try to bring some peace into the moment. I mean, there's just so many things there. But just this alone has been a practice that, again, wherever we put our attention grows. And so these kinds of practices can really make a big difference for you. And you know whatever you do for you will benefit the person in your care, won't it? Yeah. Next slide, please. So anyway, too busy to meditate? Try the Buddha patch. I'm achieving enlightenment while I clean my toilet. Also available in capsule, gel, or suppository. So we're supposed to say, everybody in America, it's sort of like, just give me a pill for that, okay? Or a patch. But the thing is, this kind of practice you have to do. But I get how busy and stressed, and you do not want one more thing in your life. So what I would suggest is this instead. How do we weave it in? As best you can. If you have 30 seconds, 30 seconds. Later, if you get a minute, because at the end of the day, it's cumulative, right? We're going to work on this. So with awareness of breath, remember that any time you remember to stop and take a breath, you hit the recalibration on things, right? The reset button. Very, very important. And again, even if you're running, you're still breathing. Even if your arms are full or you're holding somebody up, you're still breathing. So you can use this practice as long as you're alive. Body scan, again, when you scanned your body, did anybody notice that there were tight areas and stuff that you didn't realize before, right? Tense, like in the temporomandibular joint. So again, isn't it amazing just to be able to say, I need to loosen this up, because you know it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse unless you do something about it. Mindful movement, I wish we had more time, but I mean, you know about, and you don't need to get into pretzel configurations with yoga. It's just really about stretching and moving and opening the body. Mindful walking. Have you ever walked with a person with dementia, and as they start to slow down, you realize you're in the front and they're in the back? It's actually an invitation to go, what if I slow down and walk with them and just breathe and come into this present moment? Yeah. Well, I'm running out of time now, but I think there's another slide. Oh, yes. Here, I wanted to read this poem to you. If you can start the day without caffeine, if you can always be cheerful, ignoring aches and pains, if you can resist complaining and boring people with your troubles, if you can eat the same food every day and be grateful for it, if you can understand when your loved ones are too busy to give you any time, take criticism and blame without resentment, if you can conquer tension without medical help, relax without alcohol, sleep without the aid of drugs, then you are probably the family dog. Dogs have so much to teach us about being in the present moment and being mindful. Last slide, please. So anyway, they're at Hospice of the Valley on the website. There's lots of different mindfulness things, including free guided stuff. Here's my punchline. You can't stop the waves. You can't stop all of the unpredictable highs and lows that are going to be entering your life as a dementia caregiver, but you absolutely can learn to surf. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. So we're going to have our panel now reflect, and I have several questions, but I think really in essence is, and by the way, they are all on the other side of their role as caregiver, right? So they bring unique perspective, having been there, done that, a lot right and a lot wrong, and a lot self-corrected, which I think is really helpful to learn from those who have walked the walk. And so I guess I would ask you to each maybe share what kind of mindful practices did you do, perhaps that you weren't even aware of that you were doing, or what were the things that you found that kept you centered? Because we know this is an exasperating role.
Well, I think I'm probably, excuse me, the last person that's real mindful in terms of relaxation. Oh, that's very frightening. Anyway, I don't know. I don't think you probably remember me, but we met once. Hospice advertised that they were doing a mindfulness, and I went, and nobody else showed up, and so they decided not to do it. And it was disappointing to me because I knew I needed it, but I didn't know how. But so as you're speaking, you know, I think I've been told about breathing. My daughter is does all kinds of body kinds of things, and she'd always say, just breathe. Well, breathe, what does breathe have to do with it? Did any of you feel that way? Does breathe have anything to do with it? But it's amazing how just to spend a few minutes at it really makes a difference. And I certainly feel it as I walk through my body where some of that tension is held. But you know, in the time that I was working with my husband, I felt like I was most of the time overwhelmed. It just didn't even think much about what I was thinking. I was thinking about what he needs next, what we need to be doing, what should I do for his activity. It was usually focused outside myself, and I thought I was doing a good job by talking to people. I had family members that were really, really good people to share with. And so I just always let them know what I was feeling, what his progress was, and I thought that was doing it. But since that time, I've recognized that so many of the times in the dementia world, we talk about the patient or the person that has the dementia. And so what's so important about what Tempe has come up with is business of focusing on the caregiver, because we've got things going on all the time. And though you can share with people in your family or friends, nobody understands it like other people that are going through it. So I think if anything that took down my stress was sharing with others. The second thing, and this is going to sound kind of funny, when I would feel a lot of stress, I don't know how many of you play cards on the computer, but if anything would relax me, I could just hold out everything else. I'd go to the computer and play some cards, and that would definitely relax me for a while. But I think the important thing that she's bringing to the surface is the importance of paying attention to ourselves, because I think it's universal that caregivers tend to give more than we, not more than we should give, because we need to be giving, but we aren't aware of how much it's taking from us. So we really need to focus on our own self-care. I saw to it that I included always being in my water exercise, because that was very helpful. Things like that, or I saw to it that I kept my social events going, because that would relax me, and also did some hiring of people. But I think I don't know how much time I'm supposed to take. Okay.
Thank you. I think one of the first things that I've learned as a caregiver is to say to yourself over and over, what difference does it make? And if it doesn't make any difference, don't worry about it. I'll never forget the time my wife was getting ready to go to the day program, and she went in to put lipstick on. I went in the bathroom, and she had it all in her hair. And I said to myself, well, where she's going, it won't make any difference. And then I took her to Oakwood, and after that, I made an appointment right away for a hairdresser. Well, then what I did from then on is every time I went into the bathroom with her, I watched her. And I think the mindfulness was the fact that after a while you just realize that what difference does it make? And if it doesn't make any difference, I did find out though that she was trying to put lipstick on one day and she was going to bite it. So that's when you realize you have to watch every little thing. This mindfulness, I was a high school teacher for 28 years, and I think the students need to learn that, because I think they were sitting in their seats, but they weren't there over and over. Anyway, I think the best thing to me is, and I've learned to do that with a lot of things, when I get kind of stressed, I say, wait a minute, what difference does it make? And if it's not going to make any difference, the heck with it.
At first, in my experience as a caregiver, my job seemed to be managing other people so that I could create a world for my husband that was perfect. And that was pretty easy. I barked at people, cajoled people, did everything I needed to do to get them in line so that when we were around, they knew how to behave. The second part was when I had to work on helping him be safe. And although knowing that I wouldn't change his behaviors, working in a way that he'd be safe forever. So I started by noticing that I was cranky all the time. And I knew that wasn't going to work. So my remedy was stop, leave the room, grab a pillow, and scream. Now, in some situations, that works. The activity that I was trying to discontinue allowed me to do that. But the more I did it, the more I realized grocery store, that's probably not going to be appropriate. And so I knew I needed something else. The other thing is, as a caregiver facilitator for Dementia-Friendly Tempe, when some of the other caregivers would ask that question, it was clear to me that was not a piece of advice that I could soundly and consistently give. So I have to say, where were you when I needed you? Because stop makes so much sense. It's just so easy. So that's in my personal life. Then what I noticed was I needed to stop first to recognize where I was. And I learned this from driving. When there would be a bad day on the freeway or even just local streets, I would be very frustrated at the drivers. And then I would see it, and then I would breathe. And it just was almost common sense. Susie, take a breath. Take 10 more. And so I applied it to working with my husband. And another thing that I learned that seemed to help is to know when to apply stop or when to breathe. And my remedy was something that I had heard from another caregiver, and it was going into their world. So when I was working with Danny, I had to not be where I expected us to go, but to be where he wanted to be. And that made it easier then to go through the breathing and to recognize how far I would or wouldn't get that day.
Well, thank you all for the responses. Sound pretty typical for you all and where you're at. And so I think this idea of how do we care for ourselves and just through the simple breath. And again, Hospice of the Valley has a table out in the lobby, and I invite you to visit and think about joining one of the classes on mindfulness specific for dementia caregivers. So it's very much applied for you. Thank you all. So now we're going to move on and talk about engaged and connected living. And this is so important because, as you've heard, and you know, it's your person's needs that always exceed yours. And yet your ability to stay connected and engaged is as important as you're wanting to keep your loved one connected and engaged as well. So Sherry, we're going to have you, and I'll run the slides if you'd like, talk to us about how can we do this, for heaven's sakes.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a joy to be with you here, and I do feel very centered. Thank you, Mary Beth. That's a great way to start. So I have the honor of being the president and CEO of Oakwood Creative Care. We have day clubs for adults with cognitive and physical impairments. We also have family support and resources as well, and we predominantly serve the East Valley. But for me, this topic in particular is really near and dear to my heart. And so, Dan, you want to go to the next slide? We're going to be talking really about why community matters, why creativity matters, and then give you hopefully some really quick tips to be able to put in your pocket, be able to pull them out at any time, and hopefully be able to breathe and enjoy life a little bit more. So like I said, this subject is very near and dear to my heart. So I actually graduated from Grand Canyon University with a degree in recreation. I come from a family of educators. My dad has his doctorate in education, and all of my siblings, I was the youngest, they all got these fancy degrees, and then here I was, bringing up the caboose with a degree in recreation. So I was at Arizona Mills Mall with my dad, and it was near the end of my college career, and he saw a clown walking around with balloons. And he said, "Sherry, give her your resume. I bet she has a degree in recreation too." Ouch! That hurt. But it kind of caused me to think, like, what am I going to do with this degree? So I ended up moving over to England, and I spent 12 months in England working at a day program for adults with developmental disabilities. And there, I experienced something phenomenal, but I had no idea what I was experiencing at the time. So I came back to the States, and I went and I sat with my grandmother, who was at the end of her life. She was in the best facility in Tempe, paying tons of money for this facility. And when I went to visit her, she was on my dad's bandwagon and said, "What are you going to do now with this degree in recreation and this year in England?" And I gave her my lofty dreams, and she said, "No, you need to work at a place like this and help people like me and make it better." And I said, no, that is not what I'm going to do. But sure enough, I ended up applying to a position just because her voice was in the back of my head, and I got that position. It was working at a day program. Are you sensing the theme? A day program in the West Valley for early stage Alzheimer's disease. I'd never supervised anybody. I didn't even know what Alzheimer's was. I had no clue what was happening, and I got the job. So I remember having to make my first phone call to a family caregiver, and I sat there and thought, they're going to find out I have no idea what I'm doing when I make this phone call. But several months later, my dad called me, and he said, "Something's wrong with Grandma Steele. I need you to fly out to North Dakota and really help me." I'm not a doctor by any means, but I flew out to North Dakota, and he was sitting at a table with her, and they were going over their finances, or her finances, and my dad was trying to help her. And I was just watching the interaction, and she was starting to get really agitated because she was using the remote control instead of a calculator, and it just wasn't connecting. So I helped my family get the resources to help my grandma get a diagnosis. She ended up moving to Arizona. And so I was still early in my career, I was in my early 20s, and I was able to document her journey through this disease process. I stayed the night with her in her first night in an assisted living facility. I felt what that was like. And it was the first time she had been exposed to living to other people who were more advanced in the disease than she was. And she was terrified. And I was terrified for her. But there was one video, she allowed me to videotape her journey. I don't remember if I said that or not, but she did, and it was powerful. And there was one video that we did together that haunted me. And I have it here. Hopefully it'll work. It's not working. Okay. It's okay. It's on YouTube. It's on Oakwood's YouTube page if you ever want to see it. And maybe if we have time at the end, we can pull it up if you guys want to see it. But anyway, what she said was so powerful to me. She said, "I'm afraid it's going to become so bad that I won't know people. I'll become just a body and an old face. And I don't want to get that way. I want to keep active in things and read and do little things that are supposed to help with this." It was like a light bulb went on in my head. There's a really great photographer that has taken images of people who are looking in a mirror and looking back at themselves. And when they look into the mirror, they see their younger selves, right? But we as the family, or we as the professional caregivers, we see them as an 80-year-old male with dementia. But we have to align ourselves with seeing who they see in the mirror and recognizing that they are more than just an old body. There is a spirit and a soul that remains through the entire disease process. And it's our jobs as professionals and family members to still see who they see in the mirror and reach in and grab that out and pull out that spirit within each of them. So the other video I was going to show was about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I've spent the last 22 years of my career, which blows my mind that it's been that long, really trying to understand what the heck is going on. When I first started studying Alzheimer's disease, people would say, people who have a dementia diagnosis, they can do 5 minutes of an activity, and that's it. We have to lock them in 4 walls so that they're safe, so that they don't fall. But when we really look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what we're doing really well is we're making sure that they're being fed, we're making sure that their basic needs are being met. But beyond that, we're missing the boat. And we're not remembering that people with dementia, they can still love. They can still be loved. They need to be able to feel safe in an environment. And when we start to see some behaviors starting to happen, it kind of comes back to those core feelings. And if those core feelings aren't being met, then we're going to see a negative response through behaviors typically. So it is important. Another area that I have found that is a struggle, and a lot of families come to us and say, I feel really alone as a family caregiver. I feel really isolated. And we used to be really, really social, but now it's just getting harder. It's getting harder to go to restaurants. It's getting harder to be at family gatherings. It's just getting harder. And I'm actually in the process right now of reading an interesting book called Finding Your People. And no matter where we are in our journey of life, we need to have a tribe around us to be able to help us. And if our nuclear family, like our children, whoever that might be, your immediate family, if you're not finding that tribe within there, look outside of that. I think the memory cafes and what Jan and the team has created here in Tempe is an amazing start to be able to start finding that community and that nucleus to be able to live life together. So I encourage you to be bold. If you are at a caregiver support group with somebody that you're like, hey, I can jam with this person, they seem kind of cool, give them your phone number, meet for coffee. Start building those relationships and that rapport, because it's so, so crucial, and we need to have that network and that support. I feel so strongly in this that I just bought a building that on Power and Main Street that's going to be opening in the next month or so, that will just be, we're calling it the Dementia Hub. We'll have a team of dementia experts, but 4,000 square feet of a cafe area, classrooms, that we have. I wake up at night thinking nobody's going to come to this place. But I believe so strongly that we need to be living life together in a comfortable, safe, loving environment and sharing life together. And so hopefully this will be a blessing to family caregivers as it grows and becomes whatever it is it's supposed to become. But don't be afraid. Put yourself in vulnerable situations and start making friends. Start meeting people going through this journey, because it's so important. Man, this really didn't translate well, did it? So I did a quick Google search, and this is what came up for how to engage a person with dementia. So we're supposed to give that person a hand massage with lotion. We're supposed to brush his or her hair, give the person a manicure, take photos, look through photos, encourage the person to talk more about subjects they enjoy, and make a family tree poster board. These are all really nice things, but we're missing that soul factor, that ability to really come in and connect with somebody on a very deep level and a meaningful level. So what these solutions are missing is that no matter where we are in the disease process, we still need to have purpose and meaning in our life. We don't just need to be served, but we also need to be able to serve. And so there's powerful ways that we've discovered through our journey at Oakwood of challenging industry standard. What I have found is that we're afraid. We're afraid somebody's going to fall. We're afraid somebody's going to leave. We're afraid somebody's going to hit us. We're afraid. And what we have done in that fear is we have robbed people of their ability to live their best life, instead of challenging what can be done and what remains in the brain. So what I have found in my years of studying this disease is the power of the creative center of the brain. That part of the brain transcends what's happening as the disease progresses. And so that's what we use in all. I'm going to tell you the secrets of Oakwood. This is it. It's the creative center of the brain and allowing people to have purpose and meaning in their life. This is what you see when you go into a traditional setting. Fake baby dolls, coloring sheets, robotic pets, the pool noodles, and lots of people gathered around, one person typically entertaining them and everybody asleep, right? This is traditional dementia care. I believe that we should have real babies, real pets, no scrubs. Love is love, right? Love is powerful. And and you can sense that love and that connection beyond something that's plastic. They know the difference in their heart of hearts, and we can do better. That's the next slide. So at Oakwood, these are the areas that we found to work the best. So doing art workshops. So research suggests that individuals can still communicate through the creative center of the brain, even when they are no longer verbal. By tapping into the creative center of the brain, new pathways are created for increased quality of life and decreased depression. It really is powerful. We can take something that you and I would do that we would enjoy, some kind of a hobby, and we can break it down into small, simple, scalable activities for people to be able to engage. So if you have a pile of wood, sand it together. Take a moment and just be together doing something and achieving something. And it doesn't have to be elaborate, but it has to be meaningful. So lifelong learning classes. There are some amazing tools out there. We've developed a tool that can help you as a caregiver. It's called Engaging at Home, where we've created lifelong learning classes. We have free monthly virtual sessions that you can engage in as well. But the lifelong learning classes are important because cognitive engagement supports memory retention and improves speech. So if we're focusing on what remains left, long-term memory, short-term memory kind of fades first, and then long-term memory. So if we can tap into the areas of the brain that are still meaningful to individuals, they can still have a meaningful conversation and be a part of a discussion about something. Let's skip this one, go to the next one. So music classes. Music is so powerful. Just even if you're at home and you're sensing the vibe is off, there's a little bit of agitation, put some music on in the background. It can shift things in seconds. Sing together, dance together, seize the moment, go to concerts, do things together that bring out that creative center of the brain. Fitness. Kind of going back to what Mary Beth talked about, right? Breathing, being mindful, just taking those principles of breathing and doing it together can be a really beautiful and engaging moment. But go to a community center, take a fitness class together, watch a video on YouTube together, just to keep active and stimulated in that way is very, very powerful. Okay, so there's a book that I think, good thing I brought the hard copy because the video didn't download, right? When in doubt, go paper. Okay, so I was reading this book to my kids. I don't even know where this book came from. It just appeared on our bookshelf. And so I was reading it to them, and I thought, this is so simple. It's so simple. But this book right here holds the secret to dementia care. Right here, this little book. Be happy. Sing and dance a little. Draw and paint a little. Make friends. Share what you have. So don't just give to them. Allow them to give back to you. It's important to their soul. Be the best you. So as a family caregiver, be the best you can during this journey, but allow them to be the best them that they can be. A lot of times we start taking away things like helping with the dishes, setting the table, doing those kinds of things, but allowing them to be a part of those activities allows them to be the best them. Be helpful. Again, going back to that idea of allowing them to engage and be helpful. Be curious. Don't stop exploring what works. What works one day might not work the other, right? But allow creativity and curiosity. Be brave. It's a hard journey that you're on, but you can do it. And being brave for both of you, right? You both have to be brave to be able to do this and do it well. Stand up for yourself and others. You are your loved one's greatest advocate. Be a hero for Mother Nature. Get out and garden together. You know, be in nature. Go for a walk. Say thank you to people that teach you, help you, cheer you on, and get an ice cream cone. I will tell you, one of the most powerful tools we have in our toolbox is ice cream. I'm not going to lie. My friend Harry Mitchell, we have a saying that we've come up with together that I think is the secret beyond this book. Eat ice cream, give hugs, and laugh out loud. Right, Harry? Unplug yourself from TV and video games. So what I hear a lot from family members is that their loved ones are just sitting at home watching TV. Unplug it. Am I done? I'm over? Okay, you guys got to get this book. Put it on your coffee table and read it. It's simple, right? Break it down, but have fun together. And you can be happy even through this journey. It can be incredible and life-changing.
Thank you, Sherry. Sorry about the technology issues that we're having. So a couple things I want to mention. One is Oakwood also has a table where you can learn more about not only their programs, but ideas on staying engaged. And then our friends from the Scottsdale Center for the Arts, Laura Hales, is here, and they offer what they call a memory lounge. And this is a person living with dementia and care partner combined art experience. So this is about you also staying engaged and connected, because we're really good often at trying to find our loved one ways to stay connected, but we forget about ourselves and how creativity can refuel us and re-energize us. So I'm going to start with Susie this time, and maybe you each can share, what did you do, one, to keep your person engaged, but what did you do to keep yourself engaged and connected? Because boy, it's easy to disconnect, isn't it?
I feel like you knew my Danny. He was diagnosed at 57, so he was young and healthy and vibrant, and he wasn't going to be in any facility where they sat around in chairs. It just wouldn't work. I was fortunate. We called it Danny's Village, and quarterly I would send people updates, but there were enough people in his village, even until the end, that someone wanted to do something with Danny. Two of his colleagues that had been working with him for the gas and electric company in Albuquerque, New Mexico, would come visit about once a month. And I greeted him at the front door and gave him the do's and don'ts or best ways to be with Danny. And what they discovered was the two of them spoke about old times, but Danny never spoke. His first manifestation of dementia was aphasia. So later on, I explained to him, he loves listening to the stories. And these were the funny stories, not, hey, we got a lot of work done today, but what did we do after work today? So he was engaged even in that, because I think he threw himself back into being their friends and enjoying them. The other thing is he was highly active, and so early on, when I realized a daycare setting, at least what was available to me, was not going to be the answer, but every now and then I had to be off doing things, I utilized a caregiver who came to the home. Our fourth caregiver was the one Danny picked. He was 23 years old. I suspect he reminded Danny of either his own youth or our son. Chris would take him hiking, bring a friend, so one of them would hike in front of Danny, the other would hike behind Danny. Chris was a very good a cyclist. I barely could turn the pedals and change the gears, so Chris was the person to go biking with Danny. And that kind of physical activity that I could then schedule frequently was good. He never slept as well as when he had a day of strenuous physical activity. As you said, keep them finding ways to help you. Danny did help. He wanted to help. He always wanted to help. And one of the things we did early on in our marriage is divide up. Outside activities were his and inside were mine. So he would water, and he would start watering in the house. So all the faucets would go on in the house, and then he would go outside and do that. And at first I thought, how do I extinguish his behavior? And then I realized from his perspective, he was so helping. And I got to enjoy the sound of the running water because Danny was helping. He would hold the extension cord for the lawnmower for Chris. So Chris would mow, and Danny was right behind him with this very long extension cord that he held over his arm. And there's nothing more beautiful than a person with dementia who's limited in many ways, and to watch them line up when they are helping. And there's always something they can do. As far as my growth, we had just enough people. We had people we lost during this, and for all the right reasons and their reasons, it didn't work out for them to be close to us anymore, and we understood that. But a few did, and they just made sure. I either had long phone conversations, I had a lunch out, I had a support group there too, and that seemed to take care of it.
One of the things I'm sure a lot of you have done as caregivers, you spend a lot of time walking around Costco. And one time we were leaving, and the people who were at the inn selling water softeners and garage doors and so on, I was holding Mary Ann's hand, and they said, "Are you two married?" And I said, "Well, yes." He said, "Well, we don't usually see married people holding hands." And I said to myself, well, I love my wife, but the reason I'm holding her hand is so I don't lose her. We were pretty lucky because both of us were teachers for many years in Tempe, lived there all our life, and we had lots of friends. One of the things that really helped me is, and all of you should never be afraid to ask anybody for help. One person asked me one time, "Can I get you a meal?" I said, "Oh, yes," because every time I tried to fix something, Mary Ann would be in the way, or it was not good for me to try to cook with her right there. So my friend got a list of friends, or put out a thing on Facebook or wherever it was, who would like to provide dinner for us. And every day I said, the meal had to be ready to eat right then, because I didn't have the time to go fix it. If I did, I would lose Mary Ann. So one of the first things is, don't be afraid to ask anybody for help. And I think they're willing to do that. I was, again, pretty lucky because Mary Ann was easy to take care of, very easy. We did watch TV, but the kind that she wanted. She loved Lawrence Welk. She was a dancer, and and that's a history show anyway, if you look at the costume, the clothes they're wearing. But she loved to watch the dance, and the songs they were singing are ones that she enjoyed. We even watch, what's the one where they're picking the wedding dress? You Say Yes to the Dress. She loved to watch the wedding dresses. And even athletics. She loved to watch basketball and baseball. Anytime anybody made a basket, it didn't matter which team it was on, she was cheering. But there was activity. And she would even call sometimes balls and strikes. She liked to watch that. But I was with her the whole time. It's not that I turned on the TV and walked out. We did that together. In fact, we did everything together. One of the things that's also important to keep engaged with them, we talked about talking. And all of you have, I'm sure, have been, maybe not, seen an improv show. Improvisation is the key, an absolute key to getting along. And the first thing about improvisation is you never say no. It's yes and, or maybe. And I tell you, I was driving home one day with Mary Ann from Oakwood, and she was just sitting in the car, so I just said, well, Mary Ann, what happened next? And she started in on something and went on, and you just started engaging with her. You're all over the place. Then I asked her about her first husband, which was me. And she said, well, he's nice, but he's kind of funny looking. So I quit asking those kind of questions. But you just keep engaging and talking. And I'll tell you, you can never read enough. I read 13 books about caregiving, about Alzheimer's, period. Some of it doesn't fit, some of it does. I was lucky because a lot of the bad things that people experience never happened with me. And I went to 2 support groups. One I'll highly recommend for the men. It's called Men Who Care at Banner's Alzheimer's. It is for men only. And the thing that was good about that, many of the men who went to caregiving groups that were mixed said men don't say the same thing around women that they would by themselves. They wouldn't cry. They wouldn't say different, they wouldn't use different kind of language. And it was a terrific group. When I first went there, I said, wow. I said, there's good news and bad news. I said, the good news is I'm not where these guys are. They're really in bad shape. And then I said to myself, the bad news is I'm going to be. And so you just kind of prepare for that. There's an old saying that I came across that said, because we all know that there's no cure for Alzheimer's, there's no prevention, it's just there. And you say, well, we all know what's going, even if you know what's going to happen, you're never prepared for how it feels. And you prepare yourself, but it's even as a caregiver, it's not going to work out the way you think it's going to work out. But you just have to be flexible. And I tell you, I ended up not enjoying necessarily, but getting along very well with Mary Ann and the Alzheimer's, mainly because she was easy. Nothing like all the horror stories that I hear.
So we're going to start with Verla next so we can stay on track. Lots of wisdom here, hopefully, that you're hearing and reinforcing just how important it is to, one, stay plugged into the person you care about, right, and find ways to help them live their best life. But the importance is as much for you to stay plugged and connected and engaged. And I think that's a perfect segue as we move into our last session on helpful living. So I'm going to invite Elaine to come up and talk about the importance of getting help in a timely way. And you've heard a little bit, but we're going to expand a bit more. So Elaine, here's the mic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is always a great event, and I'm really honored to be here. Well, there's a lot of crossover that I'm going to try and make some connections from what Sherry said and what Mary Beth said, because we don't always look at things from the perspective that we like. So go ahead. Today I'm all about resources. That's my job. I'm actually paid with Visiting Angels to be a free resource to the community. But I'm also a caregiver. My mom had vascular dementia. My dad had Alzheimer's. My father-in-law has, and they're passed. My father-in-law is living with vascular dementia. My mother-in-law has Alzheimer's and does not know it, very early stage. And my brother-in-law is really on the road of Alzheimer's. So it is surrounding me on every level, from the clients that we have to the children that I deal with and work with and connect with that live all over the country. I'm breathing it and living it, and it's emotional, and it's here, and I know how you feel. So I'm going to show you some pictures, and I want you to say what looks, just think in your head, what looks more familiar to you? What feels more familiar to you? What can you connect to? So picture A. So are you that Superman person that says, I got this, I can do it, I've been doing it, I'm reading the books, I'm taking care of it, we're doing whatever we can, we're coming along, and I really don't need any help because I got this. I'm that guy, I'm that girl, I'm here, we're good. I don't need help. Because Harry and everybody said, you need to ask for help. Or are you that person that's here because, oh my gosh, it's getting a little hairy. I don't know where to start. I don't know where I go from here. I've been doing okay, but now it just got a little sketchy. Where do we go? How does that feel? Like, what were those visceral reactions in your stomach when you saw those pictures? Did you wish you were the other guy? Or are you kind of comfortable where you are thinking, all right, this is me. All right, next one. Today we're just going to talk about what is important in this journey and how do you really get there. In the last month, I have hosted an aging conference, I have attended an aging conference, and I have attended a dementia conference. And the messages were clear and consistent all the way through, as well as here today. But one of the things that we don't always address, and I'm always that person who talks about, let's get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Are we dealing with our reality? I mean, yeah, we're going through the motions of it, but emotionally, have we captured what we need to do? And are we willing to talk about it with those we love, with those people in our circle, whether the family is family that's biological to us or the family that we have created that has become our circle, all right? And have we gotten our family in alignment? Is everybody on the same page in the same way? Have we really thought about the support that we needed? So in your packet, I have a whole page of resources. Mostly, there are a lot of the people that are here all on one plate, all on one sheet, but also additional things to help because we need to reach out. We need to proactively do it. And then putting together a team because you know what? Dementia, Alzheimer's, any of the dementias, it's not a one-person disease. It is a family condition. It is a family disease. It affects everybody in our circle. They all have a part, and they can choose to step in and support and engage, or they can choose to step out. And whether we like it or not, we sort of have to accept that reality. So how can we do that in the most effective and the most effective ways? Next slide, please. All right. So the importance of that reality. Sherry mentioned sometimes we look in the mirror and we see somebody different. So in your head, lock in what's your chronological age, your birthday, what is it? And in your head, do you feel 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever you are, or do you feel many years younger? Go for it. Because that's the picture Sherry was talking about. And that picture goes for all of us. Somebody living with this disease and somebody caring for somebody with this disease. Because that guy in the mirror, he thinks he's Superman too. Because that's why he sees that younger self. Because we still have fun and energy and ideas and capabilities far beyond what our age is. Because our age is how we feel. You know, sometimes our body betrays us. We get achy. I got a new knee this year. That was challenging. You know, we all have those pieces, but we have to deal with them. But we don't always share our reality with our family. Next slide, please. And what do we all want for our family, right? Sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. I'm not a singer, Mary Beth is. But we want it to be smooth, and we want it to be comfortable, and we want everybody to get along, but we want everybody to support us. But they can only support us if we share our reality. And as caregivers, especially with spouses, we kind of hide it from the people we love because we don't want to bother them, because they're busy, because they don't have time. They don't have the capability to do this, not because they don't have the skill, because they live 60 miles away, or they have 6 children, or they work 60 hours a week. It's not their deal, it's ours, right? But so we kind of shield them from that reality, and then they step into that reality, and they are like, what the heck is going on? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you show us? And we're like, well, you know. And then sometimes our kids get a little bossy, and they start trying to tell us what to do. Why do you think they tell us what to do? Anybody? They know better. What else? What, pardon me? They're not in the situation. They're worried about us. What else do you think they're worried about? They're not up to date. They're also worried about, if you're not dealing with it, it's going to fall to me, right? That is the reality, because I work with children all over the country, and that is their biggest fear, that they are going to have to come in and sweep up the pieces. and for all the proactive things that I do to help. When we get diagnosed with when we get diagnosed with some frightening illness, whether it's dementia or cancer or Parkinson's or COPD or what do we first do when we're afraid? Yeah, we fight. Yeah, we run. We freeze because we don't know what to do next. So the idea here is looking at all the options available to us and deciding that we need to be proactive about what we're going to do. And the only way we can do that is if we share with our children, how do we want it handled when? When what? And before we can have that conversation with our children, we have to have that conversation with ourselves. How do I want it handled when I can't drive anymore? Ooh. Am I going to listen when somebody says I'm being erratic, or am I going to just get mad? How do I want it handled when I need help in the home and I don't think that I can afford it? Or we're not safe to live here anymore. What are those pieces? These are all frightening questions. Before you can talk about it with other people, we need to kind of register in our hearts how we want it so that we can share. Now, sometimes we have multiple children or multiple people in our circle. Maybe they're siblings, maybe they're neighbors, maybe they're our best friends from college. But we share with a few people because we only allow ourselves that vulnerability with a few people. We don't blanketly give it out, right? But these guys think this because we specifically told them. But over cocktails at some point, or when we were together and feeling comfortable, we shared some things here too. But they might not be the same because here we really bared our soul, and here we gave the ideal scenario. And now the crisis happens, and all these people need to come together, just our children, and they're fighting because we didn't share the same story. We didn't give it to people in the same way. And that is critically important. We need to be proactive about what we want, and we need to be proactive about sharing so that all that stress of figuring out what we want is not on our kids. We spelled it out for them. It's so important because that's where the family infighting comes in, and that's where the difficulties and the discussions and the, and then you're feeling badly because they're not taking you into account. So next slide, please. So I love that. Whoever is it, that's fun. Okay, so everybody's kind of talking about the same thing here. So with these conferences, these are the things where the items where we need to get proactive to say we can do better, because these are the things that help us to live our best life if we engage them, if we embrace them. When we talk about purpose, and Sherry talked about even doing the dishes and setting the table, I had a client whose wife had Lewy body dementia, and she used to be an activity director at a memory care, so she was terrified at what was going to happen to her, and she was still very articulate, and she started to have some of the neuromuscular issues. She shuffled, she moved, she had delayed response, but we got a caregiver in there because he was really worried about his wife, and he had a very politically prominent position, and we got a caregiver in there. And it was seemingly like it was going well until I got a phone call where this gentleman, this smooth gentleman, just yelled at me. Said, "Your caregiver is making my wife do dishes and put things away and dust the house." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'm paying you guys to do that." And he was just this very together man who just had lost it. And I said, "Can we talk about it? Can I ask some questions about it?" And he said, "Okay, whatever, try and get out of it." And I said, "I'm not going to try and get out of it." I said, "But I'm going to ask some questions that you may think I know the answers to, but we need to walk through it." Okay. So what was your job? And he shared what his job was. And it was a big job. It was a big deal. He was somebody. And I said, "And what was your wife's job when she wasn't working at the activity center?" And he said, "Well, she took care of everything so that I could have this big job." And I said, "Well, what did she do?" And he said, "Well, she paid the bills, and she did the shopping, and she took care of the house, and she made the meals." And I said, "Okay." I said, "So what's your wife doing now?" Because we have a caregiver who's doing all that stuff. And he said, "Well, she's not supposed to be doing anything." And I said, so how do you think that makes her feel? How do you think that makes her feel? Because we just took away all the things that bring her purpose. And she had been having really intense conversations with the caregiver about, he won't let me do anything. I just feel like worthless. But I don't have the heart to tell him because he's trying to make my life better. She had all this awareness. So I shared without sharing the deep, dark secrets. And he was like, oh, well, huh. And he said, thank you. And he hung up. But 3-4 weeks later, he called me back and said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just changed it up based on what you said. Our life is a completely different life. My wife is happy. I am not stressed. It is just better because we're just doing it one day at a time. But she had that purpose because we all need it. Lack of purpose is depression. And if we don't do something for other people, doing things for other people gives us purpose. When we have pets, it gives us purpose because we have somebody to take care of. So we have to put that equation. Exercise. All these different conferences that I went to, there were statistic after statistic about physical exercise makes our brain work better. I'm sure Mary Beth can attest to that. So we do better when we move, when we get up, when we get out, when we get the blood flowing. The diet and hydration, we've been hearing that forever. We ignore it. But we can't ignore it anymore. We need to be proactive because it matters. Nutrition matters. Hydration, even keeping our joints and our organs lubricated, it matters because so many people go in the hospital because they're dehydrated. They have delirium because they're dehydrated. We have to look at the things that nourish body, mind, spirit. Respite care for those who care for loved ones. Sometimes our people just want a break from us too because we might be those helicopter people. But we have to look at how do we take care of us, because if something happens to us, we hear it, but are we proactive about it? One of the resources on the paper that you have is the National Foundation for Dementia Minds. It's actually support groups for people living with dementia. And they have all these different varieties, just men, just women, just teachers, just engineers, whatever. People like-minded so that they can connect with people that they feel that they can have a connection with. What a gift. Social engagement. How am I doing? Okay, I'm good. Social engagement, community. We had all these different resources for that Sherry talked about. Community brings us together because as humans, we need interaction to thrive, to get those brain synapses moving. And sometimes we have people that, they're introverts. They don't necessarily want to go out and engage with a lot of people. They're kind of locked into where they want to be. But that doesn't mean that we can't go out and engage with nature. I loved your mindful versus mindful slide, where just looking at the beauty of the trees, or what's the beautiful park that you have, with the water park, and it's got the people fish in Tempe, I don't know, Kiwanis Park. In Gilbert, we have the Riparian Institute with turtles and birds and all these crazy things, even a vulture. Like, there's ways to interact with nature that can bring so much joy to the heart that we have to remember to engage those things, even if that wasn't something we normally thought was part of who we are. Creativity. Sherry went through all different kinds of creativity to give us different ways to think about something. Creativity doesn't have to be a craft. Creativity can be making a sandwich versus pulling a box out of the freezer and putting it into the microwave. Something as simple as making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, there's an art to it. You have to get the peanut butter to the edges. In case you wondered what the secret was, it all has to be to the edge. Otherwise, it's just dry crust, right? But simple things are right in front of us. We have to take those moments to look at what those simple things are. All right, so on that sheet, we have all kinds of resources. But you have to be the leader of that team. You are the captain. And you have to be able to share your reality with those around you, even with friends. I actually teach a class that says how to be friends with somebody who has dementia, because more than 4 or 5 dozen people asked me to do it because they were clueless. They didn't know what to do. They didn't want to say the wrong thing. They didn't want to do the wrong thing. They didn't want to make somebody feel uncomfortable. The beauty of living with somebody with dementia, if you say something really stupid, they don't remember anyway. What they remember, we don't, you taught me this, but it's Maya Angelou. You don't remember what people say. You don't remember what people do. What you remember is how people make you feel. So we need to get in there, because as dementia progresses, we lose our language, we lose our processing time, it slows down. We start reading people through emotion, through nonverbal language. So by the speed at with which we talk, or how high our voices, or how calm and slow our voices, I can say something like, you know what? We're having a rough day, sweetie. We're having a rough day, but you know what? We're going to make it lovely. And yeah, I didn't say the most beautiful words there, but my tone of voice said, I got you. Because if I said, okay, I love you, how likely are you to believe what I'm saying? The word said it, the image didn't. I made you feel not so well loved. So anyways, I don't need to read all these things. I think there's one more. Is there one more? I don't know. The team. We need a team. And the earlier we can put together that team, the better. Because now we have the time and the wherewithal to be able to think. And when you have those wonderful snippets of lucidity and togetherness and connection, we talk about some of those things. Bring them up and ask. When you're not safe at home here with me anymore, Mama, how do you want me to do it? What do we do? Can we decide this together? But have that conversation, holding hands and locking eyes and feeling safe, because I want to keep you as long as I can. But when something happens to me, I just want to know what you want. And the sooner we have those conversations, it gives us a path, it gives us a roadway, it gives us a map on how to move forward using the people we love. I'm dinging. All right, that's it. Time's up. I have one last comment, or one last statement that I want you to sit with. Superman is Superman in a crisis. The rest of the time he's Clark Kent, and he's just like you and I. So save that energy for when you really need it, so that you can do what you really need to do all the way through.
Thank you, Elaine. So I'm going to ask a final question, and then, so if you've got questions for any of the panelists, for our caregivers, if you would put them on a note card and maybe just hold them up, and Heather's going to run and get them. In the meantime, I'm going to ask, well, we're going to start with Verla, is when did you know it was time for you to get some additional help, and how did you go about doing that? Or did you?
I was thinking about this when we were going through all the different things that are so important to do, which, at one level you feel all that, at another level you're so busy during the day just surviving or just meeting the immediate needs that it's hard to think about all those things. Your question again?
So when did you know it was time to get some extra help?
How did I know? I think by my own response. I was getting to not feel good about some of my responses, not feeling good about being patient, not feeling good about how I was starting to feel so stressed. And so the important thing was that there were people then, it was much different 4 or 5 years ago, but there were people that started telling us about things in resources, like you were talking about. Resources in the neighborhood, in the communities that were so helpful. But I'm so struck with what she was saying about having purpose and having meaning and those kinds of things. I'm not sure I always knew there toward the end. I think I operated more from what I thought would fit instead of knowing for sure what fit his soul. So.
And I think we'll all agree that we all fall short of perfection. And I think one of the biggest things and lessons to learn is how to forgive ourselves and realize we were just doing the best we could which is why we're here today. We're all learning just to get by and do the best we can, right? We need to give ourselves credit for what we're doing. So acknowledging feelings without providing judgment, right? Because you're judging yourself, saying, I'm so terrible, I lost my temper. Yeah, you did. Welcome to the human race, right? And so sometimes we don't always do it right. And that's okay, because we learn from each other. Harry, what comments would you have?
Well, sometimes our expectations are too high also. You have to lower what you can do and what you are expected to do. So watch what your expectations are. Just kind of rethink those. And one of the things, again, learn how to do improv. That's the way you just continue to talk and talk. It doesn't make any difference what you say. You know, what difference does it make? So one of the things, after a while, I found out about Oakwood, and Marianne was there because there was structure, there were people, and there were programs. And on the weekend, when there wasn't the day program, she was with me. Well, there were no programs, no structure, no people. She would cry, she would whine. It was bad. Well, after a while, I realized that she wasn't happy. And I says, that's when I decided to look into a placement, a residential placement. And let me tell you, all of you, I went to lots of them, but don't go by yourself. Always go with somebody to check out a residential place. Then you ought to do it sooner than later, because it's essentially going to happen. So don't just wait till the last minute and then decide, oh, I need to find a place, and it won't fit. You've got to do it early and do it with a friend. That's when I decided that Marianne needed some place 24/7, that she would be. And I was lucky. The first morning I walked in there, because I went every morning to breakfast with her, and the first morning there, I was so scared to walk in there, because what was going to happen. Well, she was sitting in the corner, she was waving at me and telling me what a big house this was, and everybody, it was terrific. Again, a lot of people's personalities change. Those who were nice and amicable become very mean and nasty, and vice versa. I was lucky in every way. And I had friends, and the friends went with me to every place that I was investigating. And you got to do that with somebody. Even when you go to a doctor, it's always good to have two people there to hear what's going on.
So I think I knew early on that I wasn't enough for Danny. And that's when I realized that a caregiver who would be as physically athletic as he was going to be the best thing for at least, we started out with one and worked up to 3 days a week for 4 hours. And it really just, I was a bit much. And I had my list, but his list was much longer in terms of what he enjoyed doing. So that's when I knew. The other thing that helped me, we have a daughter and a son, and early on we agreed that we would do what all the books tell us to do in terms of the medical and the mental and the financial and the legal, get all that stuff done as early as we could, and Danny must have known, because he was highly cooperative. And then the rest was going to be led by Dad. And so to the degree that we could, we mimicked or we copied or we extended whatever it was that he seemed to like. And where that really fell short was he was a partier. And there was eventually a time when I would have to pour the real wine out of the wine bottle and put grape juice in the wine bottle. But short of that, most of our activities were led by Danny until the end. And in the end, the one thing we didn't predict, and I probably read about it but just didn't process it, was at the very end, he perseverated to the degree that he wouldn't sit down. Because again, young in energy, he walked and walked and walked. I fed him while we walked. And at that point, I knew I needed extensive support. And that's when we moved from Albuquerque here, where our daughter was. And I found a lovely home that had room for 8 patients. And that worked until he really changed totally. He was not Danny anymore. But thanks to Hospice of the Valley, we got the help we needed at that point. So it did seem that we were lucky enough at every turn, there was at least someone to call. There was a recommendation of a place to go, a thing to read, a person to ask.
So don't go at it alone. You know, this is why we do these summits. There are resources, there's help, and none of you should ever have to do it alone. So Elaine's put together a really nice resource sheet. The vendors that we have here today are really here to help. And I apologize that I did not acknowledge Tempe Adult Day Healthcare. They are here today providing respite for some 15 individuals living with dementia. So how wonderful is that here they are providing that free of charge. So we've got a few minutes left for questions, and so maybe Heather, you could read them off, and then I'll maybe direct it to...
Some people are asking if we could get access to the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, so speakers, do you mind if we share it? So we will share the PowerPoint presentation. I assume we have emails from you all, and if we don't, we should because of Eventbrite. And the good news is, I realize why we didn't connect with yours, because I didn't connect to the internet. So you get to watch the wonderful videos that Sherry would have shared with us. So yes, absolutely, we will share that with you.
What are some of the things to indicate you are a family member in the beginning stages? You or a family member are in the beginning stages.
So I'm going to maybe direct this to Dr. Gallagher to talk about how do you know that this is happening, early stages are taking place.
Well, so the first, what comes to my mind immediately is, you know, so are we talking about for yourself or for someone else? Okay, so the answers could be a little different. If it's for someone else, then essentially if you know your person, so let's call that a baseline. So now, if you're bringing up the question, it's probably because you're noticing a change from baseline, right? So then, I want to know, does the word occasionally go before that? Or is it starting to be like every day? When something happens every day, and it's a change from baseline, and it's a change in the way our brains are working or the way we're functioning, then what it means is that that's not normal. It certainly doesn't mean that it's dementia. It could be sleep apnea. Your thyroid could be low. You could have subsyndromal depression. You could be taking Tylenol PM that in some people, literally, that causes confusion, right? So what it means to me is when I'm noticing a change that's significant, and that it's happening more than occasionally in an individual, a change from their baseline, that is such a crucial moment. Not to be afraid, don't jump to, oh my God, it's dementia, which is the most feared condition, right? But instead to go to a clinician and talk to them in evidence, not your opinion, right? You don't have your AAD, also a doctor, right? So, Dr. Google. So, and we want, so, right? And so you want to go and you want to speak in bullet points. Here's what they used to do, here's what they're doing now. Here's what they used to do, here's what, just present the evidence. If you go to a provider who looks at you and says, ah, you're getting old, what do you expect? Don't worry about it. You run to another provider, okay? So I hope that that helps. Now, in yourself, well, first of all, the fact that you even recognize something is a beautiful thing, because remember, some people have what's called anosognosia, which means that they can't, the part of the brain that recognizes has the ability to look inside and recognize that something's wrong. Sometimes that's one of the first places the condition can hit. So we're trying to explain to them why they need help. They're saying they don't need help. You keep explaining, they're really getting miffed at you, and the thing is, because they're having that, they're doing the best that he or she can do, right? So, but for a person who does have problems, I bet that's really distressing. I'm having age-related changes here. Anybody else? Age-related changes, right, but if it's starting to become more than occasional, if it's causing you concern in one way or another, please find a clinician. There's so many centers of excellence, memory here and stuff. But first by going to your primary provider because you have a relationship with them, hopefully some trust. They're going to do a physical exam, they're going to look at all your pills, they're going to take blood work, and then take it from there. Is that a good enough answer for y'all right now?
How to handle information overload regarding, number one, cures, it's cureless, there is none. B, medical reports, differing opinions, and just how to process.
Medical overload. Let's see. So Elaine, you probably helped sort that out. And I think one of the really important things is how do you sort it in a way that the most important people also get that information? Because here's a terrible thing that can happen is we know the toll that caregiving can take, especially on spousal caregivers. The worst thing you do is you drop over dead and the kids didn't have a clue. Let me tell you, everybody loses in that situation. So Elaine, what advice would you have for information overload? And then panelists, if you've got, because you dealt with information overload, maybe what advice you'd give. So let me start with Elaine.
Pick somebody in your circle to process with you. Kind of like when we get a diagnosis from a doctor, and if anybody's ever had like a cancer diagnosis or something, the minute they say the word, our brain shuts down and we can't process. And I've seen it happen all the time. So moving forward, take somebody to the doctor with you that can process the information. I've even had people, I've told people to ask if they can record what's going on. You know, have the person with you take notes about what's going on so that it's remembered accurately, because sometimes we can't even remember it. You know, it makes sense when they're telling us, but we can't spit it back out after the fact. And we can't be taking those notes because our brain is going too fast. So bringing someone with you and having that person be your point person to have those discussions, that's what I would suggest.
Do you have any comments? Any of you on the panel? I guess I see Susie.
It was overload, and this was about 20 years ago when Danny first got his diagnosis. I used my support group leader. She was able to sort things through. She didn't have all the answers, but she was able to say, don't worry about this amount of information. Just focus on this one. And it was very helpful.
Our primary care doctor was pretty good about this. He kind of, I suggested a few things that she was doing at home. One, there were post-it notes all over the place. My wife was a business education teacher, so she took notes on everything, and her favorite subject was shorthand, and there was a lot of notes in shorthand all over the house. Our primary care doctor suggested, well, he recommended Aricept and Namenda right away. Then you realize that there is something wrong, and he suggested that we see a neurologist. I never really had any overload because our primary care doctor, but Marianne's neurologist. And Marianne, it's kind of interesting. She came to me and said, we need to see a doctor. And I said, well, why? She says, I can't remember things. We went through the same thing everybody mentioned. Well, maybe it's sleep apnea. Maybe it's hormones. Maybe it's vitamin deficiency. We went through all of that. And she was fine with that. And finally, we went, so well, maybe you see a psychologist. We went to a psychologist. And she said, one day, she said, we're wasting our money. It's not doing any good. I need to see a doctor. So again, I was pretty lucky.
And maybe next year we'll talk research, because there's game changers happening with diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease through these new blood-based biomarkers. So I think bottom line is, yeah, have a friend, have somebody who you can process with. Stay off the internet to the extent that you're looking on medical stuff, because you're probably going to get really overwhelmed fast and maybe get bad advice. If you don't trust your clinician, you better get a good one. And as Mary Beth said, we are so blessed here in the Phoenix area. We have Banner Alzheimer's Institute, we have Barrow Neurological Institute, we have the Banner Sun Health Institute, and we have the Mayo Clinic, all of which have memory centers, and they have extended teams. So here's the thing you're going to hear from a nurse, is the docs are great at making a diagnosis, but it's the nurses and social workers who make it happen. So if you need to debrief, you go to one of those centers and you get yourself a good nurse and social worker, and you're going to be good as gold. They're going to help. And then get involved in a memory cafe or a support group. These are incredibly happy. Again, don't go at it alone. So I think we have time for one last question.
What would you recommend for family that has tried to do everything to help, but no matter what they do, she always cries? Would you say counseling?
So what to do for someone who's clearly, the family's trying everything they can possibly do and it's not working, she's crying a lot. I'm going to give this to Mary Beth. Mary Beth is a psychiatric nurse practitioner. So
it's a hard question to answer in a minute. You know what I would do? So first of all, crying. Okay, crying is bad, but is it? Let's pause for a moment. Is crying, first of all, do I have something to cry about? Yeah. Do I have the ability to put words to it and to process it in a sophisticated manner? Maybe not. But do I have that energy that's going through my body? So do I not need a vehicle for self-expression, as we will until we draw our last breath? So, okay, so I'm not trying to minimize your experience because I get it, but I'm also saying don't make the equation that crying is bad and I need to fix this if I'm going to be a good loved one, And then I would look into all of those. Can I find moments? All right, let's come back into mindfulness. Can I come back and bring some moments of pleasantness? Can I have ice cream, right? And hugs. Harry's prescription, essentially. I'm sorry, but of course I would look into anxiety disorder, depression. I would definitely look for pain. And you may be asking the person, are they having pain? And they may be saying no, but there could be physical pain there too. So physical, emotional, spiritual pain.
What would you say, Nurse Jen?
yeah.
I realized when Mary Ann was crying that she needed more than. That's when I realized when Mary Ann was crying. It was only on the weekends when we weren't at Oakwood that she wasn't happy. That was the whole thing. And so she needed somewhere to be 24/7, and the crying quit.
You asked me before about when you knew to get the next level of help. I was becoming too hypervigilant. That's when I knew I needed to find a facility of some kind. It was my hypervigilance.
Well, I want to thank our panelists and our Keep It Real caregivers for just a really informative time that we had together. We want your feedback, so again, pull out the evaluation from your bags. Please fill it out. Just go ahead and leave it on your desk, and we'll plan to pick it up. We do have our vendor tables here until 12:30, so please take advantage of learning about the amazing resources that we have in this area. And again, thank you to the city of Tempe and their leadership for hosting our 6th annual. We'll look forward to seeing you next year. I think we decided we will keep I don't know if we're on the 2nd or 3rd weekend of the month. I'm a little confused myself, but it'll be in November. And if you've got suggestions for next year, things you'd like to hear, we want to hear from you.
I want to say one last thing for caregivers, and this is something I found from Rosalind Carter. Maybe you've heard it before. There are 4 kinds of people: those who have been caregivers, those who are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And so caregiving is, that's where I think the emphasis should be. I don't really feel bad for the person with dementia because they've got dementia. But the people I feel bad for and want to help are those that are the caregivers. So my heart goes out to anybody who's a caregiver.
So well said, and with that, we will conclude our session. Thanks for being here today.